Okay, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Jonathan O'Halloran and I'm a mentor and a teacher, and I teach men and women who have got anxiety how to build confidence, discipline, gratitude, accountability, how to set goals, achieve goals, and how to go on and live their goals and dreams. So really struggling. I was very frightened, lonely. I felt alone. So I read the Bible and it helped me to overcome loneliness, followed by I had a lot of help and support from kind people that supported me. And I've just made a note here. I don't want to exclude anyone, and just wrote here, men really struggle with loneliness and admitting that they're lonely. And I'm sure and certain that a lot of women do too. I've got female friends and they've told me. But I think it would be fair to say that men struggle a bit more, depending on, again, where they're at, because of their pride and, you know, their identity with what it means to be a man and having to be tough all the time, etc. So I felt very lonely growing up as a kid, despite all the love and friendship that I was given from family and friends, which I'm really grateful for. And I'm starting to really, because I've healed a lot and grown, I can really experience that now. But for many years, I couldn't always feel that. But my loneliness came from being scared to be alone with my own thoughts and emotions. I was really scared of my own mind. I was terrified of my own negative, intrusive thoughts. As a young kid, sorry, I don't like using this word, but this is how I felt back then. I hated feeling lonely, sad, alone, depressed, ashamed and anxious. I punished myself for feeling lonely because I felt like I shouldn't feel lonely. This is the thought process I had as a teenager. I don't have this anymore as an adult. I've overcome this fear. But I had this as a teenager. I had it as in my 20s, and I had it all the way up until age 34. I'm 40 now. So in the last 6 years, I overcame, I guess, the shame and the fear of admitting this. So I felt weak and embarrassed when I was younger. It wasn't an easy thing to admit as a young man that you're lonely, especially when you pride yourself on being a strong man. I loved feeling loved growing up. It made me feel safe and it gave me peace. I think everyone would have testified for that. That's a beautiful thing. So whenever I felt lonely, I didn't feel loved, which made me feel abandoned. And that's a strong word, but I did feel that, and frightened of living. Even though that wasn't true, but that's how I felt. I believed that that the only way I could receive love was from family, friends and other people. I didn't like that truth, but I believed it, and at that time it felt true, and as far as my mind was concerned and my heart, it was true. I always remember feeling a deep sense of loneliness and sadness whenever I would spend time with my cousin, who I loved, and I just enjoyed spending time with him. It was just amazing. But when it was time to separate, obviously, you know, when I stayed at his place, my aunties and my cousins for a few days, I had to obviously eventually go back home, go to school. When he stayed at my place, he had to go back home. So when it was time to separate, I'd feel really afraid because I knew I was going to feel lonely when we separated, and I was dreading going back on my own. I didn't want to separate from my cousin and my aunties, and I was worried about the coming down from the high. Yeah, I didn't want to separate because of the love and connection that I experienced with my cousin, and that later on went on with everybody. Anyone that I was close with, friends, family. Or, you know, when I was young, there was a girl that I had a crush on that liked me around my area or at school, and we had time. I just would have that deep sense of sadness and missing the person. So being on my own meant having to deal with my thoughts and emotions, whereas when I was with my cousin, my thoughts and emotions were really good. So I had peace from my mental health and anxiety. Positive emotions were around people who I loved, trusted, and felt safe, versus negative emotions and a sense of danger and not being safe when I was alone by myself. So I associated this as connection and love with people, disconnection and anxiety when I was on my own, hence loneliness. I couldn't fully relax and surrender on my own because I didn't know how to. Apologies as well, guys and girls, for looking down, but I've got to read this, and I want to get to a stage soon where I can do a writing, memorize it, and then I can read it out or talk it out. I'm going to practice that in good time. I've also wrote here, I did have times where I loved being on my own as a kid growing up, and I did feel loved and I did feel safe, but that was usually when I was distracted with playing video games or doing art or drawing or playing some sort of board game. I loved playing video games. It took me out of my suffering and it brought me into a place of peace. However, it wasn't sustainable long term. I needed noise from the television to distract me from hearing my thoughts. I never liked thoughts growing up as a kid, unless they were positive ones, and my predominant thoughts were always negative and self-critical and fearing and what if in the future and paranoid thoughts. So I needed to be focused and distracted by a video game to stop me from thinking and feeling my emotions. I really struggled with negative emotions growing up, probably more so than the average person, but that might not even be true. I was extremely sensitive. If I felt like I upset my mum, or the fear of that, or my dad, or anybody, or if I felt like the atmosphere changed at home or in myself, I'd get really uncomfortable, frightened, and immediately get down. I could go from feeling very happy, one bad emotion, straight down into darkness. I was always a very deep thinker growing up as a kid. I would always question the deeper meaning of things and life, and that could be a blessing at times. It could also be a curse depending on how I felt. I would worry a lot about being punished for doing something wrong, even when I hadn't done anything wrong. A lot of this came from school. Being constantly told, of the negative consequences that would happen if you misbehaved, right? I guess discipline is important, people need it, but too much can traumatize you. I was terrified of misbehaving at school and upsetting my parents and the school teachers and the authorities. Even when I didn't do anything wrong, I was worried that I might make a mistake and get punished for it. I might make a mistake unknowingly. I didn't like the feeling of being shouted at. That frightened me and told off. It triggered my deepest fear and anxiety as a child, that sort of I'm going to die, that survival mechanism. The panic of being in great danger made me feel so depressed and hopeless at times as a kid. The fear of upsetting people terrified me, which is where my incessant people-pleasing pattern come from, which I'm really good at now. I've really eradicated, but it's taken me a long time. And that's why I'm really good at teaching my clients who give me permission to help them to iron out and change those people-pleasing behaviors and get that healthy balance where you're kind, you respect people, you're not nasty, you're not losing your temper, but you can say no. You can say no from love and not let people walk all over you, and also make sure that you don't do that to people. And also let love in, because people-pleasing is not just about pleasing people because you're scared they won't love you. It's also a defense mechanism for letting love in, being close with people, which is so important for everybody on this earth. What are we here for? Yeah, so I was terrified of upsetting people, everybody, especially my family, my mum and dad. I was terrified of confrontation, and I was terrified of having to face the consequences of my actions, even if they were good, mostly good, because of fear of people judging me and hating me. As a sensitive kid growing up, it didn't take much to trigger my anxiety. So when I suffered from a mental health breakdown in 2017, I had to face all my childhood fears at age 34 that I'd avoided. I avoided a lot most of my life. Even when I became successful, there was a lot of defense mechanisms in my old life. Even though I did really well, I did a lot of good, but I made a lot of mistakes too. Okay, so age 34, when I had the mental health breakdown and I was in the Gordon Hospital, it was no different to when I was scared at 10 years of age. That's how frightened I was of being punished, and because I was unwell. So I was 34, but I became so frightened I was a child again. I couldn't recognize myself. I was so lonely in hospital on the first day. I cried. I fell apart. I couldn't hide the fear and the anxiety because it ripped me to pieces. It didn't care about me wanting to uphold an image or a reputation of being a successful man previously, a businessman and a coach and a teacher and this and that. He had no regard for that, didn't care. All my distractions had been removed from making money, having a small amount of fame, success, and the idea that I and other people had about me. I was lost. I didn't understand what was happening to me, and I was in a mental hospital in a small bed with no television in a small room, and I didn't understand what was going on. Why was I there? What am I doing? I had never experienced anxiety to this degree, not as far as my memory serves me. I'd had some really scary moments growing up, some life and death situations with people trying to stab me, threatening to kill me in gangs and getting into fights and, you know, being rushed and so forth. But this was worse. I'd also been in a boxing ring, that was terrifying. But going in a ring and getting beaten in front of, you know, 500 people, getting knocked out. Well, I got stopped, but I got technically knocked out. That was easy compared to this. The emotion that I felt in the pit of my stomach told me that my life was over. That emotion from a child come up in my stomach, in my body as a kid. The sun's coming out, must be a good sign.